Hello, my name's Jane Mangold, and I'm the Extension Invasive Plant Specialist at Montana State University. There are 4 non-native annual grasses that are invading Montana, particularly in Montana range and pasture lands. These annual grasses are winter annuals, which means they emerge in the fall as seedlings. They overwinter as seedlings, and then they complete their life cycle the following summer. We're going to be talking about how to identify the 4 invasive annual grasses, and we'll be covering cheatgrass, Japanese brome, ventonata, and Medusahead. Cheatgrass, also called downy brome, is the most widespread annual grass that's invading in Montana. Cheatgrass tends to mature earlier than the other 3 annual grasses, and when it matures, it turns from a greenish color to a reddish purple color. This usually happens by about mid to late June, and at that time, cheatgrass becomes very visible on the landscape because that reddish purple color shows up in stark contrast to the greenness of the perennial grasses that are on the landscape. The inflorescence or seed head of cheatgrass tends to droop to one side, and the seeds in the florets tend to spread out towards the bottom. They're sort of flared like a pair of boot-cut jeans. At the tip of each seed, you'll see an appendage called an awn, and these awns on cheatgrass are typically about a 1/2 inch long, and they're mostly straight. Sometimes they'll twist a little, but they tend to remain straight. The stems of cheatgrass do have some hairs on the stems, and that's important to note, especially if you're looking at cheatgrass before it is flowering, because those stems help to differentiate cheatgrass from some of the other annual grasses that we'll be talking about. Japanese brome, also called field brome, is the second most abundant invasive annual grass in Montana after cheatgrass. And as you might expect, given its name, it's very closely related to cheatgrass, and the two look very similar to each other, especially when they are in the seedling stage. In general, Japanese brome has more hairs on the stem than cheatgrass does. As Japanese brome matures and develops inflorescences or seed heads, it starts to look different than cheatgrass. Most notably, Japanese brome does not turn the reddish purple color that cheatgrass does. It maintains a green color as the seeds ripen. Japanese brome, like cheatgrass, has a drooping inflorescence or seed head, and it also has awns on the tip of its seeds. However, the seeds of Japanese brome are more plump and fatter, and the awns are shorter, typically less than a 1/2 inch. As the seeds mature, those awns may also bend downward, which you will not see in cheatgrass. The seeds of Japanese brome are more compact, and they don't spread outward like the seeds of cheatgrass. Ventonata, also called wiregrass, is a more recent invader in Montana compared to cheatgrass and Japanese brome. It typically matures by late July, early August, and when it matures, the seed head opens up, giving it a very open and airy appearance. When you see ventonata on the landscape, it almost looks like a yellowish-brown fog or mist. The little stems that hold the seeds onto the main stem of the grass come off that grass at almost a 90-degree angle, which helps to account for that open, airy appearance. And the grass itself is very fine and wiry. Ventonata has 2 types of awns. The awns on the bottom seeds are fairly straight, but the awns on the upper seeds bend. Both awns range in length from 1/4 to a 1/2 inch. The last feature I'd like to point out about ventonata is the ligule. So the ligule is a membrane-like appendage that shows up where the blade of the grass is attached to the stem of the grass. If you pull the blade away from the main stem, you'll see this little membrane sticking up, and that membrane is kind of torn and tattered at the tip, and that's quite diagnostic for ventonata. The final grass we're going to cover is Medusahead. Medusahead is the least common of the invasive annual grasses in Montana. The most distinguishing feature on Medusahead is its awns. It has very long awns. Those awns can be 1 to 4 inches in length. And earlier in the summer, when the plant is still green, the awns are straight. But as Medusahead matures, the awns twist and turn, and it gives the plant a rather wild and unruly appearance. In addition to long awns, Medusahead also has long glooms. So the glooms are two scale-like appendages on the seed head that hold the seed in place. And on Medusahead, the glooms can be up to 1 inch long. So even after the seeds fall off the plant, the glooms remain and the plant keeps that rather wild and unruly appearance. Another feature of Medusahead is that it develops a fairly thick litter layer. After the plants die and the stems are laying on the surface of the soil, you will see a rather thick litter layer. So that litter layer remains into the fall, even after the seeds have fallen off. And that litter layer will even remain from year to year. So you will notice that if you come across a patch of Medusahead. Grass identification is difficult. If you find an unknown grass and you're suspicious it might be one of the 4 invasive annuals, particularly Medusahead or ventinata, please contact your local extension agent or your local weed district and get help in identifying that grass. I'm Jane Mangold, Montana State University Extension Invasive Plant Specialist. Thanks for joining me.